Welcome back to Made for More. I am your host, Holly J. Moore. I am a divorce lawyer who is passionate about helping you use the adversity in your life to grow and show up as the best version of yourself. I am joined today by my producer, Aaron Bender.
I will throw a quick question back at you. When you started this firm, yes, it was just you, but
yes,
as the firm grew and it's grown into the behemoth that it is today,
yes.
Did you have in mind like who you were going to hire, what they would look like or the background or anything like that? Just kind of curious as you started your business.
No, I mean, you're asking me if I tried to hire diverse people?
Yeah. Because the clients who walk in are going to be diverse.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The honest answer is no, absolutely not. It was not in my awareness or mind at all. And our guest today is going to be talking to us about diversity and inclusion. And so this may be a very wrong answer, and maybe I will learn more and learn to do better, as we film this episode. But I personally believe in a meritocracy. Whoever is the best gets hired. But the interesting thing is, I haven't really even noticed, but one day somebody made a comment about the diversity of the firm, and Valerie was like, yeah, have you noticed how diverse the firm is? In terms of race, sexuality, gender, all the things, it is very diverse. And it's just interesting. I mean, I just hire the best talent and the best fit for the firm, and it happens to make a very diverse team. We are joined today by Doc Jana, author of the book Subtle Acts of Exclusion. They are also an entrepreneur, author, life and business coach, Afrofuturist, and a pleasure activist. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Excellent. Okay, I got to just get what I would say is the fun stuff out of the way. Tell me what a pleasure activist is.
So pleasure, I can't remember who officially coined pleasure activism, but it was, in fact, Adrienne Maree Brown, the author Adrienne Maree Brown, who popularized it and wrote a book by the same title. But it is all about seeking liberation through joy.
Okay.
So we use joy as the vehicle to get ourselves and others free.
Love it. Okay. So I know that we've got a lot to talk about today, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit to your book, Subtle Acts of Exclusion: How to Understand, Identify, and Stop Microaggressions. And I really just kind of want to just kick off this discussion with something that you touch on at the beginning of your book, which I think really is going to sort of put people at ease who are watching and listening to this episode. And this is this concept of, there is a school of thought today in our society where it's like, oh my gosh, I can't say anything anymore. Everyone is so sensitive. Everyone is offended by every little thing. So let's just start the discussion with you kind of addressing that. The people that are feeling like that, what do you say to them?
So they're not wrong. For feeling that way, for thinking that way. It is just that our cultures and our society haven't caught up with the rapid pace at which we are developing emotionally and socially. So people have a greater expectation of care from each other and for each other. And we have an expectation. So many people are getting therapy. So many people are using therapeutic language and understanding, oh my gosh, we've all been traumatized at some point in our life. Our childhoods, our relationships, things have caused us harm. And so while it is difficult to always know how to say the right thing, I would reframe that for people and say, do you consider yourself to be a thoughtful person? Do you want to be causing harm with your, casual encounters? If not, then the recognition we have to all have is that we do have a responsibility in this age of greater understanding to raise our own awareness so that we're not just haphazardly hurting people. Because anyone who is capable of reading and understanding or listening to an audiobook or watching a Netflix podcast or a Netflix documentary or something, listening to podcasts, we all have the capacity to take a little bit of time to learn how to take better care of each other. And what I love about what used to be the workplace DEI stuff, a lot of it is falling away now, is those skills that you learn in those environments don't just help you with your colleagues or your direct reports, they help you in all of your life. The number of people who said to me over the years, thank you so much for writing this book. I had to read it for book club for work, but it's helping me communicate better with my wife and children.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, tell us a little, because one of the things that I loved about your book, and I'll be totally honest, like this is an area where I don't have a super heightened awareness. I mean, I own a business. Aaron and I were talking about at the top of the show, you know, he was asking me like, do you think about, you know, diversity in hiring? And I said, I have to be honest, I really don't. I hire the best talent. That has resulted in a very diverse team here at the law firm. But it's not something that I have really been super aware of and that has been at the forefront of my mind. But I know that we all need to work to move in that direction. And I think one of the most poignant aspects of your book is how you talk about, you know, people that are, you know, using these little microaggression terms, or I shouldn't even say little, but these microaggressions, these subtle acts of exclusion. Like, we have the best of intentions, right? It's like we're not bad people for doing it. And I'm saying we because I think even you point out in your book, like we all do it. So speak a little bit to that. One, explain to us exactly what you mean by a subtle act of exclusion. You refer to it in your book as an SAE. Explain to us exactly what that is, and then talk to us a little bit about how maybe just help us remove the shame a little bit. If people are listening, are like, oh shit, that's me. Like I'm doing that all day long. Like help us to kind of reconcile that.
Yeah. And like shame first, like no one should feel shame about it. We just have to recognize that, yes, it will take a little bit of effort, but that effort is so worth it to lessen the harm that we cause without meaning to. We all have caused harm without meaning to, and it feels bad. We don't want to hurt each other.
Right.
So we just do a little bit of extra work. So a subtle act of exclusion, or an SAE, is a word or an action, a behavior that serves to exclude someone. That doesn't, it's not about intent. It's not about what you meant to do, but when you say or do or behave in a certain way, the way that it lands with another person is that it makes them feel bad. It makes them feel excluded in some way, like you don't belong, you're not normal, there's something wrong with you, etc. So some examples of that we use in the book, like, if you're sometimes old school meeting culture, everybody's sitting around a table, we realize that we don't have the secretary is not there, and we need someone to take notes. A lot of times people would point to the nearest female, the nearest woman, and say, hey, Christy, could you take notes? And it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Someone's got to take notes. We all know how to write, but why are we asking Christy to do that? Or why are we asking, oh, Christy, do you mind staying back and cleaning up the coffee cups because Jocelyn is out right now? Yeah. Like those things. Or calling a Black person articulate. Like, I'm a public speaker. I get paid by the word, right? And so the number of times that people will say, oh my gosh, your talk was really great. You're so articulate. Well, I'm a professional, I'm a 7-figure
What did you think?
speaker.
What were you expecting?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're genuinely trying to say, I love your content. I love your message. But when you say that to a Black person, the implication is, oh my God, I didn't expect you to be able to speak so well. And so it's subtle, and they're often connected to points of difference or demographic things like that. And again, they exclude people in ways that, that just make them feel not so great, assuming things about people's identity, making them feel marginalized because of their, disabilities or lack thereof, assuming that the older people in the room or the meeting don't know anything about technology because they're boomers, little things. But they have a cumulative effect, especially in the workplace, when over and over and over again, people are making assumptions about who you are and your capabilities, your worth, your values, or your experience based on some casual assumption that is often tied back to identity. Not always, but often.
Right. So your example about, like casting the female to write. I was in a CEO group. And I was actually the only female in the group, and there's a chair of that group. The rest were men. And, the chair of the group would always ask me to write on the whiteboard. And it really bothered the other men in the group. They would talk to me about it behind, like after, like, oh, Holly, I'm so sorry. I don't know why he always asks you to write. But it didn't necessarily make me feel bad. So is it a microaggression or an SAE if it doesn't, like, I didn't feel bad. I was just like, maybe
still is.
It still is. Okay. Even if it doesn't. Okay.
Because you not feeling bad is a form of internalized oppression. You've been taught that as a woman, it is your job to serve the men, whether you realize you got that messaging or not. It's normalized in that kind of environment for us, assigned female at birth people to do those, jobs that are more menial, as it were, right? You're a CEO and you're being asked to write on a whiteboard like a scribe.
Right.
That's internalized oppression. You've normalized it because our culture has normalized it so much.
Okay. So you made the comment, assigned female at birth. So I just want to touch on that really quick because you are non-binary, correct? Is that the correct way to say that? Okay.
Yes.
You use the pronouns they, them. But before we started shooting, you said, I go by they, them. If you she, me, I'm not going to be offended. And I have to say I breathed a sigh of relief because I don't, of course, none of us want to offend anyone else. So tell me a little bit about that, because I think there are people that are offended, correct, if you use the wrong pronoun.
Yes.
So have you made that choice? Like, I am not going to get offended if someone uses this incorrectly, or tell me a little bit about that.
So it's very much like, I don't know if you've tracked over the years. I don't know what generation is. You're so beautiful. You could be in your 20s. I have no idea. I have no idea.
Thank you. I'm 43.
All right. So I'm 47. So we have, over the years, African-American people, Black people have gone by many different names. And depending on the person that you talk to, like the census used to say Negro when you checked that box. And then they finally changed it to African American. And there were a lot of people, Black people, who were very mad when that changed because they identified a particular way. It is person by person. Oftentimes the people who are offended are folks who, like, if somebody transitions from male to female and you use a male pronoun on them, that's highly offensive. If somebody transitions from female to male and you use a female pronoun because you know that they were assigned female at birth, it is still offensive because that's not their choice. The reason that I'm not offended by she, her pronouns, and I say that is because my version of non-binary, everybody has a different story, but my version of non-binary is I was actually raised Roman Catholic.
Okay.
I have a Catholic mom and a Baptist dad.
Okay.
And I was raised with the concept of the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I bought it hook, line, and sinker. So for me, the idea of three being one is very simple. I'm also a mystic, and I'm deeply connected to my own divinity and my connection to God. So I know that the divine resides within me. I never thought about pronouns or that part of my identity until the millennials came out with a silver platter and said, hey, we get to pick our pronouns now. Which ones would you choose? And I was like, well, heck, no one ever asked. And when the question was asked, I said, I actually wouldn't choose feminine or masculine pronouns because I'm more than a man and I'm not quite a woman. So I use they, them pronouns. And for me, it's because within me resides the divine masculine, the divine feminine, and the spiritual, the divine. And so when you say they, them to me, it is an acknowledgement of my sacred genderedness and my sacred non-genderedness. So for some people who identify as non-binary, they are dissociated from gender, period. So they don't want to hear he or she because they do not identify with either. I identify with all of the above.
Okay. So that's really fascinating and that's really beautiful. What you have kind of articulated is that not everybody has the same story, the same reasons behind pronouns or identities or anything of that sort. So as we navigate the world and we, connect with different people, we run into different people, how do we navigate this? Because not everybody, is going to know the backstory of each individual person. So how do we navigate that?
So it has been, and it honestly feels like it started on the West Coast. Like people on the West Coast were introducing themselves. Hi, my name is Doc Jana. My pronouns are they, them. They were doing that a really long time ago, and it slowly started to make its way across the country. And so normalizing, announcing your pronouns is great. And when you don't know, you ask. It's not offensive to ask. And like, for instance, when I decided to use they, them pronouns, I was very uncomfortable because I was a CEO of a company. I had a whole staff. And even though we did diversity and inclusion work, I didn't want to make anyone's job hard. I didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it was my company. It was my culture to create. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I can't imagine having to come out in a company that you work for. I had a
Right.
hard time, and I sent a memo and I said to everyone, hey, this is what's happening, and I'm going to do this, and I just want to make sure that, everybody is comfortable or whatever. And I had two specific staffers who said, thank goodness. And I said, if anybody, I might put it on my business cards on the website. And they're like, you know what? That's awesome. We want to do that too. I had a male named with an ambiguous, an ambiguously gendered name.
Yeah.
Who said, every time people call me or email me, they call me she.
Right.
And I would love to have he, him pronouns on my things just so people know that I'm a boy.
Right.
And then I had another, actually it was two other people who had similar things with the names, but they were on the verge of coming out as non-binary as well, and felt safer because I did it. So when you introduce yourself in a public forum or just in general, and you say, hey, my name is Holly, I use she, her pronouns, you're making an announcement to everyone in the proximity that it is safe to do so.
Okay.
And by normalizing the use of, or the declaration of pronouns, even if you are cisgender, you are making a safe environment for the people around you, because it doesn't feel safe when you are non-binary, or when you are using any kind of alternate pronouns or pronouns that don't match your assigned gender
Right.
at birth.
Right. So let's just say we get this wrong and we offend somebody. What do we do once we offend someone?
You move on very quickly. You can say, so it's if it was, oh, Holly, so I blah blah blah, everything's wonderful, and I accidentally say I mean she, and then you keep moving, right? Because what the instinct is, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I respect
Right.
your pronouns, I can't believe I got it. When you've now made it about you, and you're putting a spotlight on this person for whom it is already often difficult to navigate these things, and you're making an embarrassment of the whole show. So you can say it, you can correct it, you can apologize once, and then move on very, very quickly.
Okay.
And as long as you just quickly correct it, that's the thing to do. So when I said to you, like, I don't love she, her pronouns.
Yeah.
If you introduced me and you said 7 of them in a row, that kind of like, ugh, because that's not who I am. So what did I say to you after I said, if you she me, it's okay? I said, all you got to do is throw some they, thems out there, and I know you see me.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you, in your book, you mention, it was, I wish I tabbed it, but I don't think I did. You were talking about how, the generations that are coming up, they appear to be very sensitive. And you mentioned the book, The Coddling of the American Mind, which I've actually read that book. And you disagree with the premise of that book, correct? The premise of that book is kind of like, at these liberal universities, it's sort of like there's not enough different thoughts being given to the students. Would you say that's an accurate representation?
So that particular contribution was made by the
other author.
The other author.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have not read that book.
Okay. So we will. Well, I think. Can you still speak to, basically, why do you think? We talked a little bit about at the top of the show, like, why has everybody become so sensitive, and how? Do you speak to that a little bit?
I don't think anybody has become sensitive. I think as a species, we are all sensitive. It is just that, back in the day, children were seen and not heard.
Yes.
That didn't mean children were quieter. Children were oppressed. Yes. Children were not respected. Children were not given a voice or agency, but that didn't make it right. It was hurtful to them. And many of those children grew up with trauma and proceeded to do traumatic things to their children because that's the way they were raised and they were told that was normal. It was, back in the day in the workplace, the expectation was that you kind of sit down, shut up, fall in line, and that you listen to authority. People weren't invited to question authority, to innovate, to do the things that are required to make a company thrive, to make a business grow by challenging the status quo and coming up with new and miraculous things. That requires a bit of friction. We weren't allowed to do that back in the day.
Right.
So no, there's not an increase in sensitivity. There's an increase in compassion, and there's an increase in personal self-worth and the courage to stand up for yourself in the face of unkindness.
Okay. So let me ask you this question. I think that's a amazing way to reframe it. I like it. That's beautiful that it's an increase in compassion. Where do we draw the line in terms of having a sense of humor, being able to laugh at ourselves, being a little bit lighthearted versus it's now offensive and all of that? Like, where is the line?
So this depends on context, right?
Okay.
Right? Because I can do all of those things with my friends and family all day long, because with those people, I have relationship equity. And if harms are caused, that we can very easily hash that out, deal with it, and it's a safe environment. Right. If you're talking about the workplace, that's a very different thing, because if people are making jokes at your expense, if people are, demeaning and degrading you, or worse, causing racial or gender or sexual orientation violence with their words and their actions, those aren't things that are small, because they have the capacity to affect people's employment, their livelihood, their opportunities for promotion. So it doesn't get to just be lighthearted in an unsafe environment. And this is why divesting from DEI programs is a horrible idea, because not everyone is getting the same home training. People don't just know how to respect each other from the womb. And if they're not learning it at home, my argument was the workplace was the biggest learning laboratory we had outside of structured education to further develop I hate it when people call it soft skills. It's not soft skills, it's interpersonal skills, because that culture stuff will make or break your organization. And so we can't take it lightly. We have to take very seriously the well-being of our people, because as symbiotic animals, if you have high blood pressure and you're on the verge of a heart attack, if you are unwell, if you are stressed, and we work in proximity, even if it's Zoom, you are affecting my physical well-being, my emotional well-being, and my spiritual well-being. So it is in our collective best interest to take very good care of each other, because the better each of us is, the better all of us are. Like all of those things, like these diversity things, they come with something called masking, right? Where we hide what we're actually feeling. We just try to protect ourselves. The energy that it takes to hide your identity and to fit in and to be seen and not heard can take up to 80% of your productivity away. It is so stressful for a human being to shrink themselves to fit some mold that they feel like they need to fit in order to not be targeted and abused in the workplace. So it's just serious business. Now, when it is privileged and people take the time to learn about it and talk about it and actually build, like my first book was Overcoming Bias, Building Authentic Relationships Across Differences. If you're creating a culture where you really build relationships, and you have created a culture of respect and accountability, where it's okay for us to say, hey, Jocelyn, that term that you used doesn't really work for people, and it's particularly offensive to people with disabilities, because we have relationship equity and we've shown that we care about each other. Those things can happen, and they can just move through really quickly. It falls apart because we weren't actually building relationships, and we don't actually have any respect for each other. So you don't get to be jokey and fun with me if you don't actually respect me.
Got it. Okay.
I'm not your friend, I'm your colleague.
Right. Okay.
At home and with your friends, I'm your friend, I'm your colleague. You can do that. That's not a privilege. Like, nobody owes each other friendship in the workplace. So it's not funny, it's business.
Right. Okay. That makes perfect sense. So for the business owners watching and listening, what could they do today? Like, what are the top 3 things that they could do, that they should do today to really foster a more safe environment for everyone?
So we put in that book, we use the SAE accountability system, where we say, we recognize that harm has been caused in this culture. We recognize that not everybody is working with the same set of skills, and we are making it officially not okay to harm people in the workplace. Like, if these things were like on the factory floor, we have 6 days since the last accident, right? We
Yeah.
should have a thing that is, 6 minutes since the last cultural offense, right?
Right.
But when you say, when you declare to the organization that we are going to hold ourselves accountable for treating each other well, because we want this to be not just a physically safe workplace, but an emotionally safe workplace. And what leadership has to do is they have to model the behavior. They have to actually invite people to call them in. And when they catch themselves misusing pronouns or doing subtle acts of exclusion, the onus is on leadership to model that kind of behavior first and normalize treating each other with care. So the
Right.
first thing that has to happen is, like, you can't just tell the employees to be away. Meanwhile, leadership is acting any old kind of way. So it starts with leadership getting their stuff together and recognizing that a core leadership competency is knowing how to treat people with respect.
Okay. I mean, you would think that would be a given, right? But it's clearly not.
It's not.
It's not.
It's not taught.
Right.
Like that's that. And we promote people based on technical competency. We need to start including promoting people based on their capacity to inspire people, to motivate people, to create a safe team environment, and to foster a sense of belonging amongst the people they work with. The more leaders like that we have, the less garbage we have to deal with, the less lawsuits we have to deal with. If people actually feel safe and understand, because you can't tell people how to what to think in the workplace. Like this is a big point of contention between me and some of my colleagues in the field. The idea that you can tell people what to believe and what to think is absolutely ludicrous. Keep your grubby hands off of my ideals. Now, as an employer, you absolutely have the right and the responsibility to tell people, to dictate what behavior is acceptable in the workplace and what behavior is not.
Okay.
So you don't have to believe it, but you do have to treat people with respect.
Right.
I don't care, like, how you vote is your business, but you don't mistreat people
Right.
in this workplace, or else there are consequences.
Right. Okay. And you said it before, but I just want to sort of make sure that it's really clear to anybody listening that this isn't only just some altruistic, compassionate, touchy-feely thing. It's actually like profitable business sense, right?
Hugely.
Yeah.
Hugely profitable. Yeah. I mean, we have study after study after study after study that has demonstrated that, one, having diversity first it helps the bottom line significantly.
Yes.
And then optimizing that diversity to go to the next step and actually create inclusion and belonging creates cohesiveness, it fosters innovation, and it does all of the things that make shareholders wealthy, which shouldn't be the primary measure, but is the business imperative.
Right.
Those are all the things that help. And you said something that was really fascinating and beautiful when you said, while you don't privilege diversity, you hire the most competent people, and it has resulted in diversity. There's a difference between diversity being a barrier and not being a barrier. In your case, you're not discriminating when you see the opportunity to hire someone who is qualified. The problem is that a lot of people are. A lot of people
okay.
are. Like, so the reason that you have the initiative and you have the numbers, you want to get demographics that roughly represent whatever the demographics are in the area that you serve or the country or whatever. Some people are failing to privilege diversity, but they're also discriminating against it. You're not privileging it,
Right.
but you're also not discriminating against it.
Right.
And that's why you're able to have diversity and competency at the same time.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't know that. Like, that's okay. That makes so much sense.
I had so many clients over the years that would come and, like, literally it was like one of the number one things. They're like, so we built this company and, like, we accidentally made it entirely white and we didn't mean to do that. Can you help us? And it's like,
okay.
yeah, it's not a crime, but it is emblematic of the fact that you and all the people who did the hiring are more comfortable with people who look like you. That's kind of how people are.
Okay.
So if you were not exposed to diversity, which is very common in this country, we're more segregated now than we were in the height of segregation.
Yeah.
So if you haven't had a chance to embrace diversity and all you have is the messages you get in the media,
Right.
then of course you're going to replicate yourself over and over again because you see yourself as competent,
Yeah.
and all of your family and friends look like you, and so you've just done the natural thing. That's why we need these initiatives to make sure that everybody is getting an opportunity because it actually does make companies better.
Yeah. Okay. Fascinating. Nobody else looks like me in the law firm at all. I'm like, are there any other blondes out there? Like, I mean, within the, the walls of this law firm, like I'm the minority.
Look at you. Look at you.
But that's, I hadn't like thought about it in that sort of systematic way. And that makes so much sense. Yeah. Okay. So we've talked about what to do in business. In our personal lives, what, walking out of here today, turning this podcast off, what can people do to make our interactions with others safer, more loving, all of those things?
Really see people. We are central processing units. We are all little computers. And within like 3 seconds of seeing a person and encountering a person, we are making so many judgments.
Yes.
We think they know who they are. We think we know their race. We think we know their gender. We assume their pronouns.
Yeah.
We think we know their socioeconomic class, and we might be picking up some cues and be right about those things.
Right.
But the fact that we think we know, we then proceed to behave in ways that demonstrate our own biases. So my imperative to you, and this is why I identify as a mystic, because it's not actually about the spaceship that you're walking around in. It's about the energy that resides within you.
Yeah.
Who are you at the core? You can't see that.
Right.
You don't know what my soul looks like. You know what you have to do to find out? You got to get to know me.
Yeah.
You have to be open enough to look past my skin and actually experience me as a person. Now, do I want you to say, oh, I'm colorblind and I don't see color and color doesn't matter? No, because the fact that I'm walking around in an assigned female at birth body, the fact that I present as slightly more femme than masc for the most part, because I dress that way, it's fine. I'm not offended by femininity, as I said. And the fact that I have brown skin communicates something that causes me to move through the world in a way that's different from you with blonde hair, and I don't know what color your eyes are, but people respond to us differently. So my blackness, my negritude matters. So I want you to see it, but I want you to appreciate it. I don't want you to think you know what experiences I've had. You wouldn't know from looking at me that I spoke 3 languages, that I have been to 6 out of 7 continents, that I experienced a great deal of privilege, despite the fact that my country doesn't necessarily want me to. You wouldn't know that by looking at me. You'd have to know that by talking to me. So what we do is we actually be present with each other and suspend your own biases. Act like you know nothing and allow the person in front of you to show you who they are. Yeah. Because if you think about it, regardless of what package you come in, you probably want that same courtesy. Yes. Like, remember did you see the blue bracelet thing that was happening after the election?
No.
So there were, the contingent of people. That was one that actually got me many years ago. I went into a voting place, and somebody asked me Republican or Democrat, and a person of color, assumed that I was a Democrat, and I was like, that is highly inappropriate for you to look at me and think that you know my political beliefs. Highly inappropriate, right? Yeah. So the people who voted for Kamala Harris were devastated when she did not win. And immediately there was this very large contingent of white women who voted for Kamala Harris, who wanted to signal that they weren't the people who voted the other way. Oh. And so someone came up with the idea of a blue bracelet. Okay. This blue bracelet signals that I was voting for you, and they were specifically wanted to make sure that Black people knew that we didn't do this to you. Right. And I saw a beautiful TikTok where a white man who always calls people in said, "Wait a minute, you feel uncomfortable because people are making assumptions about you based on the color of your skin?"
Touche.
I can't take my skin off and signal to you that I'm not the stereotype that you might have of me. Right. And so so nobody wants to be like, you don't want to be stereotyped because you're blonde. Right. Yeah. Right? Men don't want to be stereotyped as misogynist just because they're men. Right. Nobody wants anyone to assume anything. So let us all be who we are and take the time to allow that to come through.
Yeah, you've really given me an aha moment, because my whole life I have felt like the greatest form of love, like if you want to love me, understand me, like, or truly understand me, because I feel like I'm complex and nobody understands me and I'm always misunderstood and it's very frustrating. And I've just always felt like if you really love somebody, take the time to understand them. And I feel like that's really just what this is.
Everybody's so sensitive. I can't say anything. No, you can, but you have to take some time to understand. And the broad strokes are big cultural things that if you start to learn them, it's just like the first time somebody encounters a person in America who speaks Spanish as a first language and they have a very thick accent, it is jarring. When you encounter an accent that you've never heard before, it's like, oh my God, I can't understand anything you're saying.
Yeah.
But if you get to know one person who speaks English as a second or third or fourth language, but Spanish is their first language, there's a pattern.
Yes. You can start to understand them. Yes.
You start to understand them because it's essentially, it's a dialect. It's an accent.
Right.
You start to understand them because you've taken the time to stop being flabbergasted at the existence of the accent, right? Same as being flabbergasted by my blonde bombshell beauty or being flabbergasted by my black articulateness.
Yes.
Stop being flabbergasted. Be present with the person. Pay attention to the words that are coming out of their mouth. And we have to spend more time like getting heart to heart, right? Because you can feel people too. And sometimes people are just like, well, how do I convert people who don't think the same as me or vote the same as me? That is not your job. Your job is to be who you are. And if you move heart to heart with people, you'll know when you are in the presence of someone who you should not be wasting your time, breath, and energy on. They want to be where they are. Right. Because there's a difference between I just don't know the cultural cues yet, and I don't want to know the cultural cues. Right. There's a difference between I don't understand and I effing hate you. Those are very different energies. And I don't want to vilify the people who have not had exposure to culture. Right. But that doesn't absolve them from the responsibility. It's just like ignorance is no excuse under the law. Oh, I didn't know I couldn't kill people. Well, sorry, but you did. Right. And there are consequences. So you might be a good person. You might not understand these cultural cues, but Netflix and Google and YouTube does exist. Right. And books are there, and books are free at the library.
Yes. Yes. And you can get this book. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Doc Jana. This has been fascinating and educational, insightful, and I really appreciate what you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
Absolutely. I've got just a little bit more to say. It really, truly is about being seen and understood. And if you're like me, you may have maybe shied away from this, diversity and inclusion stuff. Maybe it's a little intimidating. It does feel like people maybe sometimes are overly sensitive, but I really took a lot out of that conversation with Doc Jana because at the end of the day, it is just trying to understand people. And for me, and maybe for you too, that is truly the greatest form of love and care that you can have for someone, is seeing them for who they truly are, not what they present as, but what they truly are, and truly trying to understand them. And I know you can do it because you were made for more.